Hello everyone. As you can see, I have a drawing on the screen. I finally figured out last night over like a 4-hour time span of just focusing on this of how to articulate what I've been seeing in my mind that I've been trying to describe through the course of my news and reverse readings. So this basically, if you go back to my very first, I think it was called What in the World first. It was What in the World. But from the very first What in the World and News in Reverse episodes, this is like, if you could get a high perspective looking down on what I'm trying to explain that I see happening, I feel like this encompasses all of it. It's not a one-page drawing, it's a multiple-page drawing. It comes with pictures. It comes also with a PowerPoint because I need to first present you with my thesis of what I'm going to be explaining in this so that this makes as much sense as possible. I'm also going to be using the previous drawings that I did of the blueprint back in 2022. I'm also going to be using the drawings that I posted previously showing me drawing these. I didn't video me drawing this because it was long and I was on the couch and in bed in my office. So okay, so basically what I want to do here first is I want to show you my PowerPoint presentation that's explaining my thesis. Basically, the key to interpret and understand what I'm going to be explaining here in the map, okay? So I think we're just going to go into that. For those who've been watching We're Approaching the Devil card series, I've gone through from 1 to 5 in the first video, 6 to 10 in the second video, the court cards in the third video, and we're about to go into the major arcana, and the major arcana is where the platform up top is built. So this is part of that series. I'm just showing it a little bit differently. So for those who have not seen that series, this is essentially part 4 to that series, but this is like a standalone. Those you need to watch from the beginning to understand it cohesively. But this is what I'm breaking down in that really long slideshow. That is what the We're Approaching the Devil card series is based off of. That's like 170, I think 175 card slideshow. The one that I'm about to show you to open this is only 18 slides, well, 17 and a title. So this will be kind of a more quick explanation than that, but I'll also put timestamps in the description in case you want to skip over the thesis. I recommend you don't, but if you just want to see what I drew, I'll put the timestamp for that. Please remember that all of this is alleged, my opinion, not facts. And my thesis in a minute is going to be explaining to you everything that you can expect to hear about and see within this video. Okay, so as you can see, I titled it The Board Beneath History. Two main things that I want to point out here. One, we are going to be looking at the entire formatting of this as if it's a giant chess match. That's going to be very important to know just going into it. And two, I want to point out history can be broken up into his story. So that's also going to be significant in this. A symbolic model of consciousness, strategy, and the final alignment of human choice. This image is generated off of the perspective of the final point that I'm trying to make here. So it is a bit of like a spoiler alert that doesn't give away too much information. This thesis proposes a symbolic model in which reality can be understood as a strategic system resembling a chess match between divine intelligence and adversarial intelligence. Within this framework, human consciousness exists simultaneously as both participant and observer within the unfolding match. Religious texts such as the Bible are interpreted as long-term records of strategic patterns within the system, while symbolic systems such as tarot act as mirrors reflecting the current phase of the game. Through systematic exploration of the tarot sequence from the ace cards through the court cards and into the major arcana, a repeating pattern emerges that mirrors the rise and fall of power structures within history and consciousness. This progression suggests that humanity is currently approaching the symbolic stage represented by the Devil card, a phase associated with manipulation, control systems, and the testing of individual awareness. At this stage, the information necessary to understand the structure of the system has already been revealed. The remaining task is not discovery, but choice, whether individuals align with higher order principles associated with truth and awareness, important, or remain within fear based systems associated with the adversary's strategy, also important. Within this symbolic model, a final phase of deception is expected to occur as a last attempt by the adversary, the AI, to shift the alignment of as many participants as possible before the resolution of the match. However, the overarching thesis maintains that the final outcome remains consistent with the original design of the system. What am I saying? God wins. Throughout history, spiritual traditions have described existence as a struggle between opposing forces. These narratives often appear mythological, but may represent symbolic descriptions of deeper patterns within consciousness and social structure. This thesis proposes a framework in which these patterns can be interpreted through three interconnected symbolic systems: the cosmic chessboard representing strategic interaction within reality, the tarot progression representing cyclical pattern of power and consciousness, and the blueprint model describing the internal evolution of awareness. Together, these systems form a layered map for interpreting historical events, psychological development, and spiritual teachings. If you're familiar with my theory of the blueprint, the picture on the right will look very familiar. It is essentially the labyrinth within the mind that's described in the theory of the blueprint, and how we go from crown to root and then need to make the free will decision to go back up from the root to the crown to ascend. So that is an image representing that within the mind. Now we go into the chessboard of reality. In chess, the structure of the game is predetermined before the first move occurs. The board, the pieces, and the rules establish a framework within which strategy unfolds. Within this symbolic model, divine intelligence represents the architect of the system. The designer of the board understands the full structure of the game and the ultimate outcome. Opposing this design is an adversarial intelligence that operates through calculation, manipulation, and exploitation of weaknesses within the system. Its strategies rely heavily on confusion, fear, and misdirection. Human consciousness functions as both the pieces and the potential players within this system. At early stages of awareness, individuals move reactively, influenced by external pressures and internal fears. As awareness grows, individuals begin recognizing the patterns shaping the board. The moment someone recognizes the existence of the game itself represents the first step towards conscious participation. That is very important. You need to know it's happening to be able to be used as a conscious player on the board, right? So the moment that someone recognizes the existence of this happening, as above, so below, in the world and in self, the game itself represents the first step toward conscious participation. Very important. Keep that in mind. Tarot as the map of the game's phases. The tarot sequence provides, and this is what I'm talking about in the breakdown of We're Approaching the Devil card series. The tarot sequence provides a symbolic progression that mirrors the development of consciousness and the rise and fall of systems. The journey begins with the aces, which represent the emergence of potential and the beginning of cycles. As the numbered cards unfold, they describe the development of energy, conflict, cooperation, power accumulation, and eventual imbalance. The court cards represent the embodiment of these energies within systems and institutions. Kings symbolize authority structures. Queens represent strategic influence. Knights represent action and enforcement. And pages represent messages and emerging developments. When viewed collectively, the minor arcana describes how systems form, stabilize, overextend, and eventually reach points of transformation. This progression culminates in the major arcana, which represent the larger archetypal forces shaping history and consciousness. I don't know if you can see me well in the little bubble, but this image that I drew, that I showed, where it's the tower build-up looking thing, that is essentially what I am referring to when I'm talking about the build-up and eventual point of transformation. Now, catching up to where we are right now, the approach to the devil stage. Within the major arcana sequence, the devil card represents a critical stage in this cycle. Symbolically, this phase corresponds to the emergence of systems based on control, manipulation, dependency, and illusion. Structures that once served constructive purposes become corrupted by the pursuit of power and dominance. That sentence is monumentally important. I'm going to read it again. Structure that once served constructive purposes become corrupted by the pursuit of power and dominance. Think built to fall as designed. Because the adversary needs to build up the deception to grab as many people as possible at the last moment before the game is finalized, to try and make it look like God was wrong, essentially. But we'll get into that. I digress. During this stage, individuals may feel trapped within systems that appear impossible to escape. However, the devil card traditionally depicts chains that are loose rather than locked, suggesting that the primary barrier is not physical confinement, but psychological conditioning. That is literally what I'm hoping to show you, that we can break the psychological conditioning in the We're Approaching the Devil card series. That's why I'm breaking it down in the way that I am, by card, by section, by level that they're laying. In the context of the cosmic chessboard model, this stage represents a moment when the mechanisms of manipulation become visible. That's where we're at right now. Look at the Epstein files. That's where we're at. Now we're approaching the part where we're going to be asked, are you going to put on the chains, or are you going to say no? Are we going to be asked directly to our face? Absolutely not, because we're dealing with manipulation, deceit, pursuit of power. The system has reached a point where the strategies of the adversary are fully revealed. Epstein files. The revelation of information. A defining characteristic of this stage is that information necessary to understand the system has already been made available. Historical records, spiritual teachings, philosophical insights, and symbolic systems collectively provide a map of the patterns operating within the game. At this point, the focus shifts from discovery to discernment. Very important. At this point, the focus shifts from discovery to discernment. We have the information. What are we going to do with it? Individuals must decide how to interpret the information and how to align their actions. Some respond by expanding awareness and seeking truth. Others retreat into fear and confusion. And you'll find in a later part of my description when I'm doing the drawings, that's why they're trying to keep us in the root chakra lack. It's the easiest space to keep us in fear and away from the light. That's why they're trying to make it so we can't afford to live, and now there's no safe place, so we can't have community, we can't have groundedness, we can't have basic human rights. Some respond by expanding awareness and seeking truth. They're playing on God's side of the chessboard, and others retreat into fear and confusion, often reinforced by social and institutional pressures. That's why they're trying to make us in fear before the great deception, because that is the choosing to be on that team, because that's how the mirrored reality works. In as above, so below, as within, so without. Your internal consciousness is that's your tool for how you decide what to do with your free will. So we have the information. So what is your decision, essentially? Are you giving in to fear, or are you seeking truth? Because if you're seeking truth, you can very quickly get to the bottom of the fact that our entire government is lying to us. The information's there. Which team are you on? And by which team are you on, I'm not saying, there's people that are better than others. Absolutely not. Again, I go back to free will decision. Your consciousness, your perspective, your awareness is how you're deciding. Nobody's on a pedestal above anyone. It's every person for themselves. It's a decision between you and God. Are you choosing God like he chose you or no? And we'll get into later. Actually, I'm going to save that part for later. Okay, let's go into the next part. The role of fear in the adversarial strategy. Fear plays a central role in the strategies because it narrows perception and encourages reactive behavior. Look at right now. When individuals operate primarily from fear, they become easier to influence through manipulation and misinformation. That's where we're at now. Decisions made in this state tend to reinforce existing control structures. They want us, with our free will, to say they can build this tower and put themselves on the pedestal of it, because you'll find as I'm explaining the drawing, they need our free will to agree with it so that they can siphon the source that they're blocking from us. But I'll explain that more in the video, or in the drawing description. Within the symbolic model, the devil stage represents the peak effectiveness of these tactics. Again, we need to have the information. We need to have the knowledge of how to use the information, right? We have all the information. We see what we're up against, and we have the instructions that God left for us. So all of the boxes are checked of what was needed to comprehend and have the opportunity to use your free will decision. There's nowhere on the planet that you could hide from the knowledge of what's going on right now. It's too loud. And if you are on God's side, you see this information and you seek the truth. And when you seek the truth, you know, 1, that they're putting on a giant show to put us in fear. 2, they're lying to us. And 3, they know they're not going to win. That's why they're doing the whole boom boom show, because they don't want us to know that. They need to get us in fear so they get as many on their side as possible and take out as many in the process, while still knowing that they're playing chess against God. The environment becomes saturated with conflicting narratives, emotional triggers, and psychological pressure designed to destabilize perception. That's why I feel we are in the devil card, because I feel like that this slide is so overwhelmingly obvious, quite literally everywhere, quite literally all day, every day, that I don't see how it's possible to be alive and miss that this is happening right now. We have the information. Free will is a decision between us and God. Either you want to be on his side of the chess match or you don't, but it's your decision. The final phase of deception. Many spiritual traditions describe a final phase in which deception intensifies before the restoration of balance. Cue right now. Within the cosmic chessboard framework, this phase can be understood as a last attempt by the adversary strategy to influence the alignment of as many participants as possible. Cue BOMBING Iran. Okay, that's what this is. Because individuals are capable of shifting alignment through awareness. That's the key, very important. Because individuals are capable of shifting alignment through awareness. Put that right here. That's very important for the entirety of this entire presentation. The adversary strategies seek to create confusion about the nature of reality itself. So it would make sense then if the headquarters for this was called "What's real? Is this real or is that real?" Get what I'm saying? This phase, sometimes described symbolically as the Great Deception. The purpose of this deception is not simply control, but misalignment. trying to misalign the people from completing your blueprint so that you can ascend, essentially. This phase is described symbolically as the Great Deception. The purpose of this deception is not simply control, but misalignment. If individuals cannot distinguish truth from manipulation, what is real, they're more likely to reinforce the adversary's strategies through their actions. They know not what they do. When you give in to the fear and you allow for the illusion without further seeking the truth, because if you seek the truth, God's going to show it to you. His voice will be loud, or his voice will be quiet, and it will be first, and there will be clues and cues after to confirm that initial thing that he said, that he told you. The devil will come in very quick, right away. Be loud, in your face, consistent, not leave you alone. But if you seek the truth, God will give it to you. But you need to be willing to put down the grip that you have on the illusion that once felt safe, perhaps, but no longer should feel safe to you. Okay. Next slide. Alignment and frequency. If you look on the right, this is a picture of a depiction of the mind room. I'm going to show another one later, but that's the depiction of the mind room. We'll go into a further explanation about that later as well. In this model, alignment is not determined by physical location, but by the internal state of consciousness, as within, so without, as above, so below. States characterized by truth, awareness, compassion, and humility correspond to alignment with divine principles. States characterized by fear, deception, domination, and division correspond to alignment with the adversary's strategies. Spiritual teachings across many traditions emphasize internal transformation because it changes how individuals perceive and respond to the board. You can be looking at everyone's out to get me and everything's working against me, or you can be aware, okay, I'm moving forward and it may look like I'm moving into some kind of bad territory, but next thing you know, God moves the peace out of the way, moves the night the other direction, and it no longer can get me. And I realized that this was strategy to protect me from the bishop taking me out over there that I couldn't see, right? I'm talking chess pieces. So it changes how individuals perceive and respond to the board is very important because consciousness, your awareness, is determining how much you're able to be used as a piece on the board, and hence determining your experience and how much of the board you get to see, if that makes sense. Raising consciousness effectively shifts one's strategic alignment within the game. The inevitability of the endgame. In chess, once a position reaches a certain structure, the final outcome becomes inevitable. Earlier moves gradually build toward a position where checkmate cannot be avoided. Within the cosmic chessboard model, divine intelligence already understands the structure of the game and the final outcome. While adversarial strategies may attempt to disrupt or delay the process, the overall structure of the system constrains what outcomes are possible. Thus, the match unfolds not to determine the winner, but to reveal the nature of each participant's choices. Very, very important, and we'll go into this in more depth later, but I'm going to read that again. I want you to really hear me. The match unfolds not to determine the winner. This is not God's, oh, I told you so. I knew you guys would mess up. That's why I knew I'd step in. Not at all. It's to reveal the nature of each participant's choices. Why? We're going to go into this in a moment. So that God could simultaneously prove that he is the creator, he does know all, he is omnipresent, and he gave us free will. And he still welcomes us home and loves us even regardless of all of our perceived mistakes, because it was always part of the design to learn from perceived mistakes, to learn from wrong choices, quote unquote. Okay, so we're going to go into the conclusion and then we're going to go into another piece here, okay? So the integration of the chess metaphor, tarot progression, and the blueprint model offers a unified framework for understanding patterns in consciousness, history, and spiritual development. Within this framework, the cosmic chessboard represents the strategic structure of reality. The chessboard represents the strategic structure of reality. How can we understand how and why and in what? Think of it as wanting to understand what shape the world is and in which way it works and like having proof that you were right, right? Okay, that's what this is meant to mean when I say structure of reality. It's like so that we can fully understand in a visual, cohesive, um, human way to understand a divine parable? No. Human way to understand a divine model, like how they have like the space models and stuff, like the divine model of the chessboard is what I mean by the structure of reality. Um, like a model of it that we could understand, but like a life-sized model, right? Like we're in the model type of thing, right? A live model that involves individuals with free will, but also a creator that planned for that, planned all the different ins, outs, moves, sabotages, board flips, all of that. Tarot reflects the cyclical phases of power and transformation and is also our access into what I'll later describe the mind computer, a way to use the internet connection in the mind computer in a way where you can know that you're understanding what you're receiving because you can test it and dig further, which is why they wanted to frame tarot as evil, because why would the adversary want to give you a key to understanding the game that the adversary doesn't even want you to know you're playing? But again, you'll see with all the pieces of the tower, everything has to be in place. So it had to be there, but then it had to be marked as evil. Tarot, I'm saying. The blueprint describes the evolution of individual awareness. We'll go into that as well. The labyrinth of the mind, in which consciousness is a ball of light that drops into the body, goes from the crown chakra all the way down to the root chakra, learning lessons in the descension phase, and then must make the free will decision to ascend back up. What does that mean? When you hit rock bottom, you realize, oh, there's probably more here, huh? Like maybe I realized there's more before, but now I need to accept it because I need some kind of motivation to pick myself up from rock bottom. Boom, chessboard awareness. You start playing the game. You start using the lessons that you learned on the way down to understand on the way back up that it's not a punishment, it's a climb. Climb of what? Climb of perspective. Why? So that you can choose with your free will to be on God's team of the chessboard, because even though it may look at times like there's no hope, he's still winning. The current phase of the cycle corresponds symbolically to the devil's stage, where systems of manipulation reach their peak visibility and individuals are confronted with a choice. That's where we're at right now, between fear and awareness. I worded it before as we're at the devil card, and it's our choice. Are we going to put on the cuffs, the bondage, or are we going to throw it? That's this. At this stage, the critical factor is no longer information but alignment. Each participant, aka us, must decide how to interpret the patterns of the board. A tool of doing that is tarot, for example. Intuition, further, for example, right? You don't need a tool, but learning how to interpret the patterns of the board, intuition is the goal, to just use your intuition. Can you use things like tarot to verify, confirm, and deepen your intuition? Absolutely. That's why they want it to look evil, and that's why they frame spirituality as woo-woo, because how dare you have a cheat sheet. It's not even a cheat sheet, it's a built-in instruction. But how dare you have knowledge of how the game that you're not supposed to know about is working, or have access to figure out what the best moves for you are, or how to best understand the current positioning you're in. They don't want you to have that. That's why everything spiritual is viewed as woo-woo, crazy, and demonic, because that's what the demons want you to think about it, allegedly. Um, Each participant must decide how to interpret the patterns of the board and which principles will guide their moves as the game approaches its final phase. We give our sovereignty away a lot of time, our choices, to the institution that we feel like, okay, well, I need to be at this low vibration because I need to slave my life away and never be able to have a day off, and I can never make ends meet, so I need to stay in this low vibration. That they're conditioning us to feel like there's no other choice other than the system that they built. And you'll see by the end of this presentation that that's what I'm trying to explain. They've been building up this tower over time, and they're planning on putting themselves on top of the pedestal and us all the way at the bottom. It's our free will decision to do something about it. The thing that they're doing about it is putting it in place and making it solid. The thing that we need to do about it is take back our power, because we've always had the power to unplug from what they're trying to tell us is not an option to opt out of. Okay, so we're going to go into the mind room. A little bit of an explanation because it's very important in this whole concept. An additional layer of this model concerns what can be called the mind room. This is the internal space where perception, intuition, fear, logic, and external influence all compete for attention. Within this symbolic framework of the cosmic chessboard, the mind room is the place where each move is interpreted before it becomes action. That's important. Within this symbolic framework of the cosmic chessboard, the mind room is the place where each move is interpreted before it becomes action. What filter are you seeing your options from? From fear, from limitation, from lack, or from knowing that you're God's child and He didn't send you here to bow to a system that wants to put you in fear and blow up your children? It is where individuals determine which influence they will follow and therefore which side of the board their choices ultimately strengthen. In this model, divine intelligence communicates differently than the adversarial influence. The first signal often appears quietly. This is what I meant before by God appears first quietly and confirms. As initial insight, instinct, or intuitive understanding. The more you trust God's uh, gift of your intuition and you say, okay, I realize that voice is God, the loud yelling that comes after is the adversary, and you continue to say, okay, God, I trust your first word, even if you need to wait a minute till the adversary lowers the screaming so that I can hear you clearly again. I'll wait for your next response because I know that there's something I need to learn in the interim. In the meantime, that's what this means. It's where individuals determine which influence they will follow and therefore which side of the board their choices align with. Are you seeing things from, okay, God's making a move, I might be uncomfortable, but I know that in a moment He's going to move me to the next spot because He's not just going to let me get taken out in this spot. That's not the goal, right? In this model, divine intelligence communicates differently than the adversarial influence. The first signal often appears quietly as initial insight, instinct, or intuitive understanding. It's subtle and brief, but it arrives first. This first impression functions like an opening clue placed on the board before the rest of the noise begins. Afterward, the adversarial influence tends to appear. Unlike the initial signal, this influence is louder, more persistent, and emotionally charged. It introduces doubt, fear, overthinking, and distraction. It floods the mind room with alternative narratives and anxieties designed to destabilize the clarity of the original signal. In this way, the adversarial strategy relies not on arriving first, but on overwhelming the mind with noise. What does that make you think? In this way, the adversarial strategy relies not on arriving first. The adversary can't arrive first. God will always arrive first. He will always give a clue first. It just depends if you're plugged in to listening to him and knowing his voice to hear it. So knowing that the adversary can never arrive first, the adversary gets clues based off of your reactions, your focus, your attitude, or speech, right? Anything that the adversary can use for clues that you give externally, the adversary will use to try and convince you with that louder, more consistent, more annoying voice that way of the adversary is the better way, right? So this way of adversarial strategy relies not on arriving first, but on overwhelming the mind with noise. What is a real life example of this? Epstein. Yeah, we have to put this out there because it's time for everything to fall apart, but we're going to give you so much. We're going to give it to you in such a confusing way. We're going to stand up on this stage, call ourselves leaders, and bold-faced lie to your face as the evidence is literally online. And they're trying to overwhelm the mind with noise so that we just follow the louder, more consistent voice and go straight towards peace and safety that really isn't peace and safety, but is a big old trap. The pattern that follows becomes significant. Over time, small confirmations often appear that connect back to the original insight. God appears first, confirms as soon as he can. Well, I mean, he always can, but he confirms in wise ways. Okay, the adversary's taking a break for a minute. Let me pop in with this small clue, but they'll understand what it means. They'll seek the truth to confirm what God is saying. These confirmations may come through events, conversations, patterns, or symbolic reminders that reinforce the first signal, God's first signal that got there first, always. Rather than competing for attention through force, divine communication tends to reaffirm itself through subtle consistency. That's why pattern recognition is a huge tool. If you can see, oh, okay, that was God. Oh, that was God again. Oh, that was God again. Wait a minute. All of God's signs match up in a very specific way. Hold on. I think there's a message. Okay. That's kind of how that is meant to work. Within this framework, the sequence itself becomes meaningful. The quiet signal arrives first. The louder confusion follows. Then confirming clues appear later. By structuring communication in this way, the system preserves both free will and discernment. Individuals must decide which signal they trust. Very important. By structuring communication this way, the system preserves both free will and discernment. You have the information, you decide what to do with it, and God trains you to use or to decide to not use your intuition. And if you seek the truth, you will learn discernment. And pattern recognition is a tool that you're given on the process of that so that you can solidify the understanding of how to use the discernment and pattern recognition over a long period of time and use it to understand the strategy that God is using for your life and understand how that would be in your best interest, even though there are times when you have to learn hard lessons or go through certain things to create movement. This process also serves a deeper psychological purpose, philosophical purpose. If divine intelligence simply overpowered the mind room with undeniable authority, genuine choice would disappear. Now, compare that to the system that they're trying to put in place to replicate God, where they're trying to make it so you can't opt out or have a choice. But if divine intelligence simply overpowered the mind room with undeniable authority, if God was just sitting in your mind, like, no, you can't do that, you got to do this. No, that's bad. You can't do that. You would never learn, never grow, right? That would not be free will, as promised. Instead, the structure allows individuals to observe the pattern for themselves. Over time, they can recognize which voice arrives first, God's, and which voice attempts to manipulate through fear, and which signals ultimately prove reliable. Track it over time. What's that first intuitive thought? How does it show up in other ways? How does your body confirm it? How does your external life confirm it? How does your internal life confirm it? What did the adversary try to say to you? And which one ended up being right? Because I guarantee it was your first gut instinct, because that is related to God. Now, sometimes the adversary can pop in very quickly after that and hope that you missed God's clue, hope that you didn't hear it. That's why it's your responsibility to, one, engage in practices that would align you with self-trust, and two, focus on your blueprint, focus on your purpose. That keeps you knowing which voice is God's and when it shows up. And when it comes back to reconfirm the initial showing up that it did, because it's always first. The mind room. Okay, so this depiction right here is as close as I could get it to how I truly see it. Okay, it's like the if you look from outside of your eye looking in. Okay, there's a computer on the desk that represents how you connect to higher intelligence. We'll go into it later, but needing to have the password to access the computer. On the walls of the room are your beliefs and conditioning, your trauma and memories, your fears and doubts, and your stored programs. Also, pattern recognition, insight that comes from inside the computer, but it's also on the walls, collective intelligence, all of that. So basically, when you are not connected, you're just reading from the walls. When you're in fear, when you're not seeing from that third eye access point, and you don't have the password to the computer, you're reading from the walls. You're reading from your memory. You're reading from your programming. Once you have that higher intelligence access point, which is focusing on your purpose, clearing your karma, healing your wounds, you get that password for the higher intelligence computer that you see there. Then you can start really ushering in downloads. Basically, if you could say, "Hey God, show me how this part of the chessboard is working," and then you're showed, or told, or taught about through life, or in a direct way, or a download. Once you have access to that computer, that's what that unlocks. In this sense, the process becomes a form of demonstration. It reveals the difference between guidance rooted in truth and influence rooted in manipulation. At the same time, it preserves the freedom necessary for authentic alignment, preserving free will. Very important. The existence of free will within this model is central. Individuals are not punished for confusion. Very important. Individuals are not punished for confusion or mistakes within the game. The system assumes that learning occurs through experience, error, and reflection. What does that mean? It's calculated in. It's not wrong. We're not bad. We're not evil for making mistakes. We need to learn from them. If we make mistakes and we let those mistakes be our excuse to continue to make other mistakes and hurt people and run from, and then you're going down a bad path. But just making a mistake does not mean you failed, does not mean that God turned his back on you. It's an opportunity, and it's already calculated into the chess match. The repeated opportunities for correction and growth reflect a design in which love and patience — what do you need for chess? What's like the number one thing? Patience. Love and patience are built into the structure of the match itself. Now, I'll discuss this more later, but essentially think God is truth and heart, and the adversary is the truth without the heart. So without the heart, the adversary chooses to take the truth and deceive. So it's not that the adversary is dumb, it's that the adversary is very smart and designed to try and win, but also with the awareness that the heart is the interpreter. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but the heart is the interpreter. Let me try to think of how to say this without getting too ahead of myself. So God has the advantage of being able to interpret the human experience. AI, the adversary, does not. AI just has the knowledge and the desire to stop God from getting to the point where God shows that what was said actually happened, because essentially that unplugs the adversary's ability to exist. Thus, the mind room becomes the arena where the most important moves occur, while the larger chessboard reflects the historical and structural dynamics. The internal space of perception determines how each individual participates in the unfolding game. Omniscience and free will. Within this model, the structure of the game also offers a way to understand how divine omniscience and free will can exist at the same time. At first glance, those two ideas appear contradictory. If God already knows the outcome of the game, it may seem as though human choices would no longer matter. But the chessboard metaphor offers another way to understand that relationship. In chess, a master player can often see the end of the game many moves before it actually arrives. They recognize patterns, strategies, and positions that make certain outcomes inevitable long before the final outcome is played. If you understand a little bit of chess, you'll understand the weight of that, like the understanding of being able to calculate what moves could be played from the other side, depending on what moves are played by you. That's a very big intellectual feat to be able to do it on the size chessboard. I have actual mathematic calculations of what size chessboard I think this is, so we'll go into that later. But to be able to see and predict moves on this size of a chessboard when it's that difficult on a regular size chessboard shows that divine intelligence doesn't even, or artificial intelligence doesn't even scratch the surface of divine intelligence. And if that's what we have internally that we can unlock, that's why the adversary fears the light so much. The ripple effect of that kind of knowledge takes away the fear tactics that is the adversary's biggest shield to keep people from seeking the truth and digging further and putting the patterns together. But I digress. Okay, let's go further. Yet the individual moves still occur freely. Each player still chooses what to do, and those choices are real. Free will. The master simply understands the structure of the board so completely that the eventual path becomes clear. What does that mean? That means that God can still give us free will, and because of how high divine intelligence soars, can still predict the exact outcome of the game while still giving us free will. Within the cosmic chessboard framework, divine intelligence exists outside of the limits of time. From that vantage point, the entire structure of the match can be seen at once. Every possible branch of decision, every move that could occur, every consequence of those moves already exists within the full design of the system. That's why the adversary likes to joke around that God is just some guy flying around in the sky, right? That's the vantage point. God is within all of us. God is everywhere. God is within every piece of creation. But man in the sky that's not coming down to help you is because the adversary knows that God is looking at this chessboard in a way that the adversary never could. This does not remove human freedom. Instead, it means that the designer understands all possible outcomes that could emerge from human choices, probably proving, oh, okay, that would have to be God, right? That would be a way to prove it. What is these? Well, I mean, we're gonna literally go into this, so I'm not asking a real question because I have the math for later. But what's the statistic of, think just huge. I have a number of chess pieces described in something later, but describe a huge chessboard, right? What are the chances that God could predict the final outcome, where the pieces would be, and write a whole book that has all these connections to all section to section connections that also describe how the game was going to unravel centuries before it did? It means the designer understands all possible outcomes that could emerge from human choices. Now, if you knew that for sure, you would know that God's not going to damn you forever for making a little mistake because he already factored it in. The future is not forced. Rather, it unfolds through the accumulation of countless individual decisions made by conscious participants within the game. The presence of the mind room reinforces this idea. Each person encounters moments where multiple interpretations and reactions are possible. The quiet intuitive signal arrives first, followed by louder voices of fear, doubt, and pressure. In that moment, the individual chooses which voice to trust. These choices are genuine. They're not programmed or forced. However, divine intelligence already understands the possible paths that the choices can create. The designer knows how each path eventually resolves within the larger structure of the game, because of that high up perspective looking down that the adversary is so jealous of. In this, because the adversary feels like if I could just get that perspective, I could win. But it's interesting because coming full circle, the perspective that allows for that is the fact that, again, divine intelligence, God, is truth and heart. The adversary doesn't have that. The adversary wants to convince itself that it's something else that's causing God to have the perspective that God has and the adversary to not. But it's the difference of the heart. It's the difference of the heart. That's all of the difference. Because to have truth and be able to distort it and lead the population in a bad way because you want to make somebody else be wrong, essentially, is the adversary's point of view here. Wanting to prove God wrong and not having the heart to try and do it in an ethical or justifiable way, but instead just quite literally blowing up towns and cities and nations of people. Okay. The designer knows how each path eventually resolves. In this sense, omniscience functions more like a complete awareness of the entire board than control over every move. God knows the outcome not because human choices are removed, but because the system itself is perfectly understood, because he designed it. Every branch of possibility already exists within that understanding. The process, therefore, becomes a demonstration rather than a test. Very important. The process, therefore, becomes a demonstration rather than a test. God is not saying, hey, can you be good enough to not make it to hell? That's not this. God is demonstrating who he is so he can demonstrate who we are, so he can also demonstrate the contrast of that and show us who the adversary is and how it works, and how people could be deceived by it and still not be cut away from God because deception was put into the match as part of the understanding of it. The process, therefore, becomes a demonstration rather than a test. Humanity is given freedom to move, freedom to interpret the board, and freedom to align with either fear or truth. Through these choices, individuals reveal their position within the system. Which position, which knight, queen, king, rook, whichever you are, pawn, depends on your free will choices. To ascend higher, you move into different positions in the game, and you're not just used as a pawn anymore. The repeated pattern of quiet guidance followed by confirming clues also reflects this relationship. God does not override human perception with overwhelming force. Instead, guidance is offered first, then reaffirmed gently over time. The adversarial influence, by contrast, relies on pressure, confusion, and urgency. By observing this pattern repeatedly, individuals gradually learn to recognize which influence is reliable, and over time, they begin to trust the signal that consistently arrives first and proves true later. Over time, they begin to trust the signal, God, that consistently arrives first, God, and then proves true later. Intuition, signs, synchronicities. Sometimes they'll be loud. Sometimes they'll be consistent. Sometimes they'll just be once at the perfect moment and you're like, oh, yep, that was it. God knows when to drop it and how to drop it so that you'll understand it. You just need to be paying attention to listen and understand and know that it's coming from him and not the adversary trying to pretend to be the voice of God to lead you in the wrong direction. Through this design, the system reveals both divine knowledge and divine patience, which, if God is a loving father, divine knowledge and patience would make him a pretty good candidate to be a good parent. The outcome of the game is known, but the path each individual takes through it remains their own. That is your blueprint. That is your authentic expression of you. You're the divine embodied into authentic form. How do you want to express that? That's what that part means. In this way, omniscience and free will coexist within the same structure. How can God know what's going to happen, but it not be pre-planned and we still have free will? This is how. Okay, so that concludes my thesis for a breakdown of what I'm going to be explaining through the drawing. Now let's get started on the drawing. Okay, so this is the ultimate view of what I feel like the plan is, like in the final stages, in the end game, so to speak, and the structure that's being built up to maintain that long term. This is a a bit of a zoom in of just the tower part here before the ultimate foundation up here is built. Okay, because this was my interpretation that I drew in my We're Approaching the Devil card series that represented starting at the ace all the way through the court cards to the end of the king. That's this one. These drawings that you saw me potentially, if you watched them, draw in the videos that I did where I said, if you want to watch me draw the blueprint, these are what I'm going to be using after. They're not going to be in this video. This is more describing the spiritual side of it. And we're going to be also using the original blueprint drawings in describing that side of it. These are the ones I drew back in 2022. However, we're not going to really go into this part today, and this is the narcissist empath dynamic of it. We'll also go into that as well. Again, not today. This is a further breakdown of that spiritual side page. Okay, so we're going to really go into this part and what I have behind this part today, because this is what I feel we're seeing with our eyes. And then I'm going to complete the minor arcana part, or the major arcana part of From the Fool to the Devil card in my We're Approaching the Devil card series. And after that, then I'm going to go into explaining the spiritual dynamic of it after we've completely painted the picture of what we're seeing in the physical. So this is what I feel like the ultimate goal is. I am going to have all of these PDFs available to download when I'm done both this and the We're Approaching the Devil card series part of this presentation. Now I am going to go into some depth here, but the further depth and breakdown of the parts of this you'll see in the We're Approaching the Devil card series, because I break it down by card. Okay, so essentially this is part of the drawing that I did before, where it's 1, 2, 3 versus 7. 1, 2, 3 is the world stage, is the main stage here. Not the world stage, the main stage here. This little triangle of 1, 2, 3. Let me bring this down a little bit. Now I can't get that closer. Okay, I can't go that. I'm trying to make it so you can see it better. Let me maybe put this down. Give me a second. Okay, so we're going to start with focus down here. You've seen this drawing before. If you've been watching me, it's the stage, which is the USA, versus 7, which is the line leaders. So on the world stage, you always have to have other things going on. So it's like, look over here, no, look over there, look over there. So there's 3 main pillars for the main stage. That's why we can always stay overburdened with news and info and all of this, because it's coming from 3 main different components. One of these are 3 main players and their teams, like a separate match of chess between all of them, and then collectively together. We'll get into that part later. So this is the USA, because the USA is the stage. Why is the USA the stage? It's 1, test subjects. 2, which we'll get into more later, it's the company for the country that is actually the line leader's country, disguised as something else. So why is this the main stage? Because it's what the line leaders are using to purchase or trap everyone in a monopoly under their control. Okay, this is their entire plan, I feel, laid out as a picture. So how does this little group here plan on taking control of everyone else, having everyone under their direct control, if they are small compared to everyone else? It's a chess match as described, right? Think of if Battleship and chess had a baby, because they don't really know what moves the opponent is making, but it's like I sunk your battleship. Now what are you going to do? Back and forth, right? Because In chess, you go back and forth. You make a move, then the opponent makes a move. You don't get to make two moves. They don't get to make two moves. You make a move, they make a move. That's how it's playing out here, allegedly. So on this stage, because there needs to be multiple things going on, we have position 1. This is the top position that's meant to establish the anti-order. As above, so below, everything is replicated. God and the Antichrist. Well, the Antichrist had to have an anti-Antichrist. So the Antichrist's Antichrist is anti-order, which actually is part of what the adversary wants anyway. However, as above, so below, it's copy-paste, right? The adversary is positioning himself as God and in the illusion, not in reality. And to do that, there needs to be a replica of what the Antichrist was to God. Who is that? The anti-order. Basically, it ends up being the system versus the line leaders, but we'll get to that in the end. So the anti-order here is position 1, and this is the pillar of the stage, so to speak, that introduces policy and all of that kind of stuff, puts that in place. Because the ultimate goal is this country that's not actually a country, but is a disguise for one. Just hear me out till the end. Is having this main stage be the reason that everything everywhere else gets implemented under the structure of what they have in place as the AI surveillance state so that they can take and maintain control. How do they do that? They need to have the main stage be where everybody focuses on for so long, and then have the main stage create problems everywhere else. Because that pushes the world to be forced to agree to the plan that the small group has to get everyone under the control without them seeing what's happening, without us seeing what's happening. Okay, so think of if Battleship and chess had a baby and were best friends with Monopoly. That's what's happening on the world stage. So we have this little country here that, think of this, it's Israel, okay? They want us questioning what is real, okay? Think of this as they established this up to being a country. Now, I want to be careful here because I'm not saying that any ethnicity or group of people is not entitled to their heritage that they built up, even if it is a country that was built up to be a front or a cover for something else. You know, the people who grew within that space still have their heritage, still have their tradition. I'm not trying to take any of that away. However, I am saying the leadership had to make it seem like it was a normal country so that it would go over people's heads that it was actually, it was a country that had the disguise of a country being for the people, but the people were really a cover for the fact that this is for the line leaders and it's so that they can take control, disguised as a country. Now, they can't be the one, because they are so small in comparison, they can't be the one causing all the problems because it would draw too much attention to the fact that it doesn't make sense why it would just be, they have to have, again, establish this type of dynamic where it's us and them, look over here, look over there. So this country that was like a cover country, it's a country that exists to cover up for the fact that the line leaders needed a country to call their own, but couldn't do one that was too big or too established because they needed to keep things private, essentially, if I can think of a way to put it more simply. So they needed a sidekick, right? Let's start this company, USA, main stage. Let's start this company to put everything in place to be the foundation for and the structure building of why the entire world and other completed structures will go into chaos and then agree to go into peace and safety under our control. Even though we're starting it all, Israel and the USA, allegedly, even though we're starting it all, It's always been teamwork from the beginning. This is the line leaders disguised as a country using actual real human beings as a cover and not really caring about what that means for them, essentially. And then they started a company, main stage USA, in order to Florida kick off, okay, the New World Order. Mar-a-Lago means sea to lake. Now I'm going to hold your hand when I say this. When Trump says he wants to drain the swamp, he means us. Sea to lake works with this country that wants to take control, doesn't care about the people, and wants to use this land as a test subject to push the world into chaos to get everyone under their control. The kickoff, Mar-a-Lago, sea, big body of water, to lake, small body of water. Our government just showed us that they have all of the evidence and proof to convict multiple people of multiple things. And the only one in jail is Ghislaine. Do you think that the swamp that they're trying to drain is the government? Because if they were trying to drain it, they have ample reason to do it right now. Pull the plug. They're not. Why? Because we are the swamp that they're referring to. And draining us is getting rid of as many as possible so that when the actual leader steps forward, which we're seeing happen in transition right now, when the actual leader steps forward, we won't be a problem. Because it'll be too late and everything will be put in place for us to not be able to fight back. What? This tower. So they want to build up this tower, which we'll get into momentarily, but they want to build up this tower. And this is what I'm explaining and showing in the Devil card series, is going from ace to 10. 10 is like this little hat pants looking thing. See? I'm going to show you with my finger in a second. Okay, so watch my hand. I'm tracing the shape of 10. Like a little hat, almost like a hat like you would see in religious structure, okay? Traditional religious structure. So we go from the ace all the way up to the 10, and what this is build, secure, build, secure, build, secure, test, build, secure, test, because they don't want to lay too many layers and then realize down here there's a problem. Now they have to knock all this down in front of everybody and rebuild. They don't want to do that. That's why it's structured in a very specific way, okay? Build, test, build, test. First thing that they had to do was build this ladder, okay? This ladder was built up pre-9/11. Everything was put into place so that when 9/11 happened, they could introduce everything they needed to introduce, get rid of everything they needed to get rid of, shift things around in the way that they needed to. They pre-planned. So if you pre-plan an event like that, you know something's going to happen. That means that it's a call coming from inside the house. If it's a known thing before it happens, okay? So everything pre 9/11 was in place so that when 9/11 happened, everything could move smoothly to get the next wave of stuff that needed to happen. What do I mean? Pre 9/11 was them creating the initial ladder that they would then later climb up, okay? So this was not here, nothing at all. Israel forms. And you can check my timeline on this. I'm going to give further timelines after I'm done presenting. Israel forms. This ladder begins to be built. What happens to build this ladder is everything has to start with an ace. It has to start with a spark. In order to introduce an illusion or grab power or control, you need to cause a problem and be the solution, okay? So that's how we go from ace to 2. Ace is the spark, the idea, hey, I want to build a ladder. 2 is, okay, let's mess things up so that we can 3 put them back together in the way that we need them to be put together. 4, okay, now we have that foundation from the spark, the pulling apart, and the putting back together. So what does that mean? We're going to take down what God had built and mess it up on purpose and then rebuild it back through man, which is essentially a bigger picture perspective of what they're doing here. But we'll get to that in a minute. So 4 is foundation. Okay, so we had an idea. We saw something that we said, oh, we can manipulate the people from that. So let's destroy the way that God had it and try to deceive by building it back in a different way. That's how we get to 4. 4 is the foundation. 4 is when they've had the idea, they've taken it apart, and they've built it back in their own way. Now it's like, okay, it's finished. 5 is the challenge to this structure. It needs to be tested again, because if it needs to be knocked down, we don't want to wait till we're up here and knock down the whole tower. It's meant to be indestructible. So 5 is when this foundation that was built is tested. 6 is after 5's test, 6 determines, okay, are we going forward? Are we good to go? Or are we going backwards? We got to change something. Why? Because 7 is when it becomes public. 7 is when, if it goes past 6 and goes forward, an idea, a structure, a whatever, a psyop, if it goes past 6 and they're like, okay, good, we feel like this foundation is solid, it's held up to the test, it's going to go forward with 6. Now 7, we roll it out to the public in some way that will be open to scrutiny or questioning, so we can make sure that we can defend the structure that we built and tested. Then after it's tested by the public, then we go up to 8. Are we good to go, or are we walking away? If we're good to go, it becomes in place. 9, like a test run, like, okay, think COVID lockdowns or something like that. Okay, we're going to do a test run. We know that we've tested it and it can uphold to public scrutiny. Now with the 9, we're going to actually put it in place. And then once the 10 comes, it's solid. It's solidified. There's nothing you can do. It's there, right? It's up the ladder. Now this ladder is also covered. I worded it as like PVC pipe, right? The first stage was carrying everything up the ladder. Everything that they wanted to have up here at the top with them in order to use as control over everybody at the bottom, every single thing and person that went up this ladder to the top to have this knowledge and awareness of what's going on up here had to go through these stages, okay? But since this is not actually going to heaven, the adversary makes it look like, oh, you're climbing higher, you're getting power, you're getting money, you're getting this, that, blah, blah, blah. Really what you're doing is you're climbing up to hell, because once you're up here, you're trapped. And when God comes back, you don't want to be up on that tower. It shows that you knowingly chose the side of the devil. Think the Epstein files. So anything that goes up this ladder needs to start at the ace and go up. People, ideas, policies, what have you, okay? So think of it, we want to bring this up the ladder. Okay, we start with the idea. How will we bring it up the ladder? Okay, now let's pull that apart so we can put it back together. Cool, we have a foundation. Let's test it. Okay, it's good to go. Now let's give it to the public and see what they'll say so we can defend it. Okay, still like it. We're going to keep going. Okay, let's put it in place, give it a trial run. Gives us a little time to adjust anything if needed. Okay, good to go. It's locked in place. There's nothing the public can do about it. It is still in pieces on the inside, but they design it so that if we're standing here looking, we're only seeing what looks like this PVC pipe finalized structure, or we're looking up here to see the page, queen, knight, and king, and we feel like they're too powerful for us to do anything about this structure that actually is destructible, even though they don't want us to believe it is. They want it to have the appearance of not being destructible. That's why they have this pants look and PVC hat thingy over top of it. That's very symbolic of those who are high up in the Catholic Church or other churches as well. Why? Because God gave us clues and signs and tools, and they want to be the ones who determine how we understand them and how we use them. Why? Because then we won't see what they're doing with this tower, because God explains this very clearly in the Bible, what they're trying to do and what the great deception will be. So essentially this tower, okay, is being built by the line leaders, but they can't be the ones to be like, we're building the tower, right? It has to come from this main stage, okay? What's the tower? The tower is a surveillance state that's locked in place by AI, drones, constant surveillance, and makes it nearly impossible for us to opt out. Why? Because they want to sever our connection with God. They've realized that they can't do this through forcing us, because they can't force us to use our free will in any which way. So what are they doing? They're trying to quite literally lock our connection away from being able to be in flow with God. How? This AI tower that they're using to change the skies, alter the weather, block out the sun, anything that they can do to put themselves above us on top of this tower and keep us from being connected to God. I'll explain this part up here later, but this will explain outer space. So this is being built up by the line leaders who are disguising themselves as Israel, right? Allegedly. They can't be the ones to represent this and put this in place. They need the main stage to do that. That's why the US is going very quickly towards surveillance state. After that, it's going to be rolled out everywhere else as peace and safety, one world government. What they're doing now is taking out the remaining leaders who would serve a threat to this, because some of these leaders are not up here on this tower playing along. So they need to make sure that they can't fight back when they go to implement this. I feel as though they're ready to unfold, start to finish, the surveillance state, whatever else is needed to put it in place in the way I'm seeing it, which is different than how it is now. I know some people say it's already in place. We already have this and that. I'm seeing it more intensified. Okay. That more intensified version, I feel like they can start to finish implement in 72 hours. And no, it is nothing like we see now. It's not, allegedly. So essentially, their goal is to bring everything up here that they'll need and put the system, you can see the system, AI, the system, on top of the pedestal. This system covers everything. Think of it as like a fake firmament that then has like matrix line of coding down, and they try to influence our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions through this grid that they've created, because they know how the universe works and the electromagnetic connections and how things are able to flow and block and project and all of this stuff, right? So they understand how to influence consciousness. They just didn't want us to know that they knew that, which is why they act like they don't know as much as they do, right? So imagine if they've created this fake firmament and they plan on blocking us from God with that. However, the sun is the charger for our universe. The sun powers everything, right? So they can't disconnect completely, because it would turn off the life. They can't. Okay, one, God said no, and two, it wouldn't serve their purpose, because think of disconnecting a charger from your phone. Eventually it's going to die. Why would they do all this work and then be like, just let it shut off? That's not what they're doing. They need to siphon this without us getting it, block it from us, take all the energy to feed into the system, and use the very energy that should be coming to us to feed the system that's trapping us, allegedly. Outer space, space stations. What is that? Yes, Hollywood, of course, a show, but above where the fake firmament is, there's a space in between there and the real firmament. That is what they are playing as outer space. There's a thin layer between their fake firmament and God's firmament. And Project Bluebeam is going to be held within those two layers so that they can try to convince us that we're getting attacked by aliens because our government likes children. So anyways, why do you think that one of the only things that we can agree about, not we, the leaders, can agree about, is Antarctica? Well, if they're blocking out this sun with the fake firmament, but they need to have somewhere to power it into their AI system that they're putting on the pedestal, they need somewhere that's accessible to this in and out doorway between the fake and the real firmament. They need somewhere where they can collect that energy and put it into the system. Hence, nobody can agree about anything else but Antarctica. Yes, of course, because that is where they're essentially harvesting and siphoning the divine energy that should be coming to us, that they're blocking out. Why now? Why all of this? Because the shadow, the adversary, cannot create. Creating comes from love. So if the adversary has no heart, The adversary cannot create. The adversary then needs to use humans to create. Why now? Why this time? Because the adversary had to allow humans to build everything up to the point where this could be feasible, the whole firmament situation. Now, this main stage, these test subjects, this company for the cover country that's doing the kickoff of making sea to lake, draining the swamp of its own citizens because they view us as swamp creatures when they themselves are very much that. This becomes the mouthpiece for this tower once it's near completion. How does it become the mouthpiece? Because everything got up here, and now the knight, king, queen, and page are all in place to be the mouthpiece for the tower through the stage, so that the line leaders can then step in. Once the stage creates the chaos, the line leaders can step in and implement the surveillance state that they need. Turn this on. Okay. The world needs to get to such a state of chaos where they can turn this on. What does turning this on require? It requires turning what we currently have off so they can plug back into this one. It also requires having something going on in the sky so they can test out their projection system so that they know what they're capable of and when they can do it. A lot of the stuff, the rockets and all that flying in the skies, I'm near positive that they're doing experiments under that to test for Project Bluebeam, in between that fake and real layer of the firmament. Why? Because they need to make sure that this tower is ready to go before they officially unveil it. Because if they unveil it and they mess up and people are conscious of what's going on, they will never regain power, because once you can see this from the perspective of above, you can't unsee it, and you can see how everything fits together. That's why I put everything together with dates and articles in the Approaching the Devil card series, because it's not an opinion, it's a provable pattern. We've walked through all of the cards of the tarot in this since 9/11, and we are approaching the Devil card. We're approaching choice, and we have history that shows us what happens when we choose wrong or when we don't make a choice. When we let these people choose for us, and they've done all this work to build up this tower through deception, lies, and all of this, do you think that they're going to do all this to choose to do the right thing for us? They're up here, leaving us down here as they set it on fire and bomb it. They don't care about us. They cared about us giving them the knowledge, inventions, and mechanisms to build this. They cared about us developing these lands, building these nice houses and all of this, so that they can, whatever they don't bomb, utilize or rebuild, because we've given them the knowledge to. They want us to light the fires so they can strand us in the rubble. Is a poem from what is a part of one of my poems. So the double sun that we see, yes, that's the man-made sun that's existing underneath of their fake firmament, versus God's sun, which is not going away, that is above the real firmament. And they can't stop it because they can't exit the firmament that God described making since the beginning of time. So if that's true, which it is, how do we deceive that aliens are coming? Well, we make a fake firmament so that we can make it look like there's outer space. We do NASA, which is the great deception. We send people to this fake outer space. Sure. Why do you think the gravity is like the same as it was on Earth? Because that's where they were, just on the top of the fake firmament. The space station, yes, it's in the space between the fake firmament and the real firmament. The swamp, that's us. What we're in is the illusion. And the adversary wants to trap us in the root chakra, lack, separation, lack of community, underground feeling, right? So that we don't ever come back up and put all this together, because this requires our connection to source to understand, and that's what they're trying to cut off, okay? So the sun represents power and charge. The moon represents clearing and restoring. Together, they balance out the electromagnetic system that we exist inside. The ice wall symbolism is the same as this 10 hat pants structure thing that is around here, right? Think of the ice wall surrounding Antarctica. Yes, this is their ice wall surrounding their pillar that they're building up. So again, back down here, and these aren't like meant to be drawn as like a literal shape of a country. I just used the space that I had, by the way, before anyone tells me they're wrong. I know they're not a specific shape. Okay, so Epstein Island, I'm going to do this first. Epstein Island is the same like little portal thingy as Antarctica, right? So like Antarctica allows them to siphon light from the sun while denying us of it. Epstein Island is like the as below version of that. It's where they're able to siphon leverage and then dump it on us when they need to use it for their benefit, right? So Epstein Island is a project by the line leaders to trap as many people as possible so that they can't fight back when they're ready to turn this on. Main stage, look at the triangle, right? The 1, 2, 3 triangle. If I can show you right there. That look familiar? The hat, think of a bishop, think of Pope. That look familiar? The symbolism, they can't get away from the symbolism because it's how they communicate with one another without directly communicating with one another. Because if you spend 5 minutes in the Epstein files, you'll see that they're not very intelligent when it comes to communicating in a way that's not like a high schooler trying to commit a crime for the first time. Like, this is their way of, when they communicate in the way that they are in the Epstein files, that's because that's what they want us to see and to know. The way that they actually communicate is symbolism. What they tell us, what they show us is them putting on a show. And the Constitution is in place so that we believe that they're playing by rules that they were never playing by in the first place. Of course, it may have appeared that they were for a certain amount of time so that when they got close to this, we wouldn't question it. We'd say, oh, well, they need to follow the Constitution, right? No. No. Our president decided to go to war in the middle of the night without consulting Congress. No, they're not following checks and balances. They're not following the Constitution. Why? Because that was put in place by the line leaders to make it so that the population here wouldn't take control of the government that they put in place here so that they could implement their plan. But they also need to take out this government that was utilizing their foundation to implement their plan. At the end, when they're ready to really take the stage, they need to get everyone off of this stage so that they can't fight back, right? There's only so much room up here, right? That's why the Epstein files kicked everyone off. This was Israel's project from the very beginning, the line leaders' project from the very beginning. This was the trap, the honeypot, the way that they controlled how everyone else was going to be paying attention to something else while they built up this until it was too late for anyone to opt out or they had too much blackmail on them. Because I go back to the beginning, this is the stage 1, 2, 3, the USA. We have position 1, that's the anti-order, the one who puts policy in place. 2 is the AI, the one who gets everything ready for the actual surveillance rollout of everything. And then 3, disease for population control. This includes health, okay? Finance is also in there, but these are like the 3 main clowns at the circus that are meant to be grabbing your attention, right? This side thought they were winning the whole time because they were playing for less accountability. Hey, as long as I don't get in trouble for this, I'm fine. Same. No, not same. Because over here, this side is the line leaders. They were playing a different game altogether. They were trying to get more leverage, which puts them at a non-fight backable advantage. Why? Because they have the 6 points from over here. We got you, we got you, we got you, because we got leverage that you're trying to avoid. So we have a point for each of you. We have 3 points for you, 2 for you, 1 for you. We got you. But we also have another point for mystery. That's why it's 7, not 6, because nobody really knows who they're dealing with. They just know the power that they hold. So, because they're able to give and take away. Why? Because they're the ones who are orchestrating this system that's in control of everything we see. Money, not real. Time, man-made. Them in control of it. Why? So they can be in control of us. So they have an extra point for mystery, which means even if these 3 were to get out of whatever leverage that they have against them, we still lose. They've put us at a losing position. So let's say all 3 are able to get out smoke clear, free and clear, right? This is number 6. Let's say we restore all of our points. It's number 6. They still have the advantage. This controls the anti-line leaders. The anti-line leaders is everything gathered on Epstein Island. Why is it called anti-line leaders? Because these are the line leaders. Anti-line leaders is anyone who could have potentially stood in the way of this power grab, and Epstein's Island was the way to make sure that they had no ability to stop what the line leaders wanted to start, which we see now is World War. So that it can build to the part where they can test out their fake firmament, use that as a fear tactic, and try and get everyone to agree to allow this tower to control them because of peace and safety. It's not peace and safety. It is control and playing God while trying to block the real God out. Is it going to work? No, because they need it to be pitch black for this to work, and the light always wins. If there's the smallest speck of light, it's not pitch black. They need pitch black. Think blackout. They need everyone to be in fear. They can't force that. Okay, let me take a drink of water. So essentially, think of this as the old world order and this as the new world order. Everyone's like, it's in place. It's already here. Yeah, absolutely. The tower's in place. It's not turned on yet. It turns on after there is aliens in between the fake firmament and the real firmament, and a blackout, and the war that we see now. And then no, peace and safety, because the person on the stage is purposefully trying to get us to realize that they're not fit for the job. Some people are not realizing that yet. I digress. So Trump is trying to make us realize that he's not fit for this. Why? Because he is going to be replaced by the line leaders. And they need him to look like a whole hot mess so that when they come in and say, oh, peace and safety, we say, oh, well, it's better than that. Yeah, it's better than that because that was an act used as a mouthpiece from the people at the top of the tower. Now, again, in order, for this fake firmament, I wrote, think Iron Dome. Think Iron Dome, but for the Earth. Okay, the fake firmament. So for them to siphon this light that is ours from God, we need to give our free will consent and say, yes, adversary, you can have the light that God is meant to be using to charge me, and you can charge the system instead. God gives us that right through free will to make that decision if we do so choose. He explains in the Bible that that's a bad idea. That would be an example of playing for the adversary's chess team when it's perfectly available to come take a seat on God's team. There's no limit of seats. However, I do feel like there's a certain mathematical equation already put in place from the start, but not like this is the only amount of people that can come. I think it's more like this is the amount of people that I know are going to be there, but everyone has the opportunity. But we'll get into that in later parts. Okay, so things that they would have brought up this ladder. Okay, and I need to write one because I forgot to add one that I thought of. 1 second. Okay, anyways, I'm just gonna leave it out. So things that they would have brought up this ladder. Everything has to start at the ace, start at the idea. We have to take something that God made, we have to take it apart, and we have to put it back together in our way, have a foundation, test the foundation, move forward, have it tested by the public, choose to engage or walk away, put it in place, and get it ready to be finalized. Boom, finalize it. When it's finalized, it's part of the pillar, it's up the ladder. The mouthpieces that are for the system can use it to play the chess match. Okay, so things that they would have had to bring up this ladder, and essentially when they bring it up the ladder, it means that it's programmed into the system to be able to be used against us as a means to keep control for the line leaders against our better interest. Okay, so everything brought up the ladder is for that purpose, for them to keep control of everyone from up here on top of the tower with their fake firmament and their AI stuff, right? So things that they would have brought up this tower to use against us: military, tech, disease and / health stuff, government as a whole, food and water, supply and structure and regulation and all of that, money, finance, banking, travel and IDs, and we're about to make a huge leap towards the real ID. Yes, that is the line leaders implementing the web that they're shooting out. Entertainment and weather. All of that had to be curated from ace all the way through to 10, have mouthpieces and different tests to be brought up here to be put in the system. 1, because it's energy and that's how it moves. 2, because everything needed to go through a certain series of tests, because once it's put in here, once it's put into the system, it no longer has human control. It's into a system that's more intelligent than those who are implementing it or putting it into the system. Person putting it into the system, intelligence level 9. The system, intelligence level 300,000 million billion. Okay, so once the person uses their free will to put something into the system then can use it as a weapon or guard or whatever against all the people. These people at the top here think that they're doing something powerful by doing this because they're going to have all the control, right? They're not realizing that they're also going to be trapped in the same trap that they're setting for everybody else. But they just think, oh, we're cool because we have power and control, not compared to God, but that'll be a different video. We're going to go into that in a different video. So free will is at play. Big, I mean, it's essentially a battle for the soul, and who gets to decide? You, the individual. Do you want to give your life to facing away from truth or facing towards it? So the free will is, so see this little person here? They want it so that when this little person is looking at the world stage, all we see is chaos and all we are is fear, and we see this black hole over here that can suck people in, Epstein Island, right? So much going on, so much mystery, so much fighting, so much confusion, right? And then they want us to look over here and be like, wow, look, this system, it's all the way up at the top of the tower. It has all these powerful people ruling it. There's no way to bring it down. It's indestructible because all we're seeing is this giant wall here. We're not seeing all these pieces inside. And here's the thing, and I'm going to leave this video here and we're going to go into the next part in the next video. Hold on, actually. They want us to believe that this is indestructible. This is just exterior shell. These are still pieces inside. Yeah, they tested them. They're probably really hard to take down, but they're still pieces. And I'm going to leave you with this. They have everything up here that they need to trap us. It's no longer down here. It's all up here. It's all in the system. If we crash this tower down, everything they had up top falls too. I want you to think about that. I will see you soon for the next part. Please remember that this is all alleged, my opinion, not facts. If you're starting here and this is the first video in this series that you're seeing, I highly recommend that you go start from the beginning and watch We're Approaching the Devil card. Again, there's news articles, there's dates showing a walkthrough of how I feel the power of structure has been built up and is about to shift, because we are approaching the Devil card and it's our decision whether or not we put those chains on. See you for the next one. Please remember, this is all alleged, my opinion, not facts. Goodbye. Thank you for watching.